Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to Willow Creek. So I woke up this morning. It's pretty gloomy, rainy. Perks of being my own boss because I couldn't really do anything at work. So I just decided to take the day off and get some canning projects done. So that's what we're going to be working on today. We're going to be pressure canning some potatoes. And then I'm also going to be doing some roasted spaghetti sauce. I usually make my spaghetti sauce like in a big stock pot and cook it down all day long. And I use like my frozen tomatoes that I store all year long. But I made some roasted cherry tomato salsa the other day that was so good. So I think I'm going to use some of my fresh tomatoes and make a roasted spaghetti sauce. I thought that would be fun to try. I've never done it that way, so we're going to do that together. So we'll have a pressure canning recipe that we're going to do today, and then we'll have a water bath recipe that we're going to do today. So today is actually my husband's birthday. So Austin, if you're watching this, happy birthday. So we have dinner to do tonight with our family to celebrate my husband. He's turning 32. I know he hates me to say that, but he's turning 32, 21 young. So yeah, tonight's going to be a really exciting night. I don't have to cook or anything like that, so I don't have any of that kind of stuff to prep for dinner. I'm just going to get some canning projects done and kind of see how the day goes. It's pretty gloomy and yucky out today, so we're just going to be inside hanging out together and getting a couple canning projects done. So tag along for the ride, guys. So I'm going to start getting these prepped. I wish I had more potatoes to can, but that's okay. I'm going to be using some quart jars back here. We'll see how many we get. I'll probably end up having to buy more. I have already used all of my potatoes that I personally grew this year, and I went to the store. Usually I can the yellow potatoes, but a 5-pound bag of Yukon Gold potatoes at my Walmart was almost $9, and I was like, oh, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. So I got the just regular russet potatoes. I think it was like a 10-pound bag. We used some last night. I made a Mississippi pot roast and baked potatoes as a side. So I'm just going to go ahead and can up the rest of these and just use, what's here. We do have a local Amish store that's probably like 35 minutes away from me that usually has really good deals on potatoes. I just haven't been able to get down there lately. So gonna go ahead and use what I have, get these jarred up because canned potatoes is something that I go through a lot of. I use them in soups and stews, and I mean, you name it, I use them. So I love having them on hand. So while I am here today, I'm just gonna go ahead and utilize some time and get these going. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start rinsing them off and peeling them, and then we will get them diced up and put in our jars. Okay, so I got all of the potatoes prepped, and I wanted to mention you can use whatever kind of potatoes you want for this. You can skin them and can them like whole, like you could use the smaller ones. You can chop them into bigger chunks, littler chunks, whatever size you want. I'm just going to do them in about a medium chop because the majority of the things that I use them for are going into like soups and stews, like I mentioned in the beginning. So that is what works best for me. So, and I'm also going to be filling quart jars. Usually I can these in pints, but I was noticing like I would have to grab 4 pint jars for a recipe, and I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and can them in quarts and see if that goes a little bit further. That way I'm not using so many jars and lids. And the amount of potatoes that I got doesn't look like a lot, but you would actually be surprised. Once you start cutting the potatoes down and filling them in the jars, a little bit actually does go quite a ways. So I'm going to go ahead and get them chopped, get them going in the jars, and then I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. Now you can flavor the jars if you would like. You could add like garlic salt or powder. You could do like Italian seasoning. You could really season these however you want to. I just personally prefer to leave them plain so that I can kind of change the flavor components whenever I go to make them later into something. So that's how I'm going to do it. So we'll get them chopped and prepped, get the salt in our jars, and then we will go ahead and get them in the pressure canner. I started pressure canning probably a year ago. I did a lot of water bath canning whenever I very first learned how to can. And so pressure canning is new for me. It's newer for me. So like I said, I've done it for about a year, so I'm really comfortable with it now, but I know it's really intimidating to some people for good reason, because it was for me too. But I promise you, it's not as scary as it looks. It's not as scary as it sounds. It's not as intimidating as you think it is. And if you learn to pressure can, it allows you to really take your canning experience to the next level. And after I learned to pressure can, it opened up a world of like so many other preservation techniques and methods, and you know, just the ability to preserve things in a different manner. You know, I was doing a lot of water bathing and freezing and dehydrating, and then those same things that I was doing that stuff with, I was like, wow, I can pressure can them and preserve them in a different way. So it really does allow you to maximize your preservation technique. So I would highly encourage you to try it if you've never tried it before. Like I said, I promise it's not as scary as it sounds, but potatoes, if you are looking for something easy to get started with, potatoes are one of the easier things that you can do. So I'm just going to start grabbing the potatoes and chopping them and getting them in the jar. So like I said, I'm going to do about a medium chop. I usually chop it in half one more time, and then half that. So like half, and then I'm just going to start putting them in the jars. I prefer the yellow potatoes just taste-wise, but like I said, those were incredibly expensive at the store, and I just needed them in a pinch, so I went ahead and just used these. But the yellow potatoes, in my opinion, taste the best, but you use whatever kind of potato you would like. And you are going to aim to leave an inch of headspace. So I always just get the jars filled up, and then we want the water to hit at about an inch headspace. So just make sure you leave enough room for that. Like I'm going to go ahead and cut those, and that's probably plenty. So I'm going to go ahead and add some salt to the potatoes. This is pickling salt, and it's non-iodized. So whenever you're canning, you don't want to use iodized salt. So that would be like pink Himalayan salt. I think kosher salt is non-iodized. The pickling salt is non-iodized. So just make sure that whenever you are getting ready to put salt in any of your canning stuff, you're using non-iodized, because it can change the color of your canning products over time. So I think it's typically like one tablespoon or like a half a teaspoon of salt, but you can really add however much you want. It's not for the preservation of the food necessarily, it's just for flavor. So I'm just gonna add like 1/4 of a teaspoon, because I don't like my water to be like super salty. So there's that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and use some distilled water. Now you can use tap water to fill these. I just usually prefer to use distilled. So again, leave about an inch headspace. And then I am going to take just a knife and kind of work it around the sides and make sure that that's debubbled really well. And then I didn't get water or any, like there's no sticky components on the rim of this jar, so I don't really need to wipe it off. But first jar down. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going through all of these jars and getting them filled and putting them in the canner. Now, I'm not cooking the potatoes or anything, so I don't need to have my canner heating up to temperature to accommodate the temperature of the potatoes that are going in this jar. So I'll just add like room temperature water to it, and we'll get the temperature up with the potatoes. So whenever you're pressure canning or canning in general, you want to make sure that your jar temperature is the same temperature as your water as much as you can, because you don't want to accidentally bust a jar, because these are glass and like temperature fluctuations can cause these to crack. So definitely, if you're gonna like raw pack them like I am, don't get the canner super hot and then try to put these in there, because you could potentially bust a jar. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start loading these in. There's no water in this yet, so I will put some in there. But that is perfect. So for this canner specifically, it says that we need 3 quarts of water, and for every hour that you go over that, you need to add an extra quart. So I'm going to go ahead and get the amount of water that we need in here, and then we will get these heating up and canning. Okay, so the amount of water that's needed is in. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip my stove up to high, and we are going to go ahead and get the lid on. So for my canner, there's arrows right here, and it tells you exactly where the lid goes, and we're just going to slide that into place. Make sure that's on there nice and secure. And then once this pressure canner starts heating up to temperature, it's going to start spewing steam. So we have to get it to the next point, which is a steady stream of steam blowing out of the top of this for 10 consecutive minutes before we can put our weight on. So I'm going to go ahead and let this do its thing, and I'm going to get started on the roasted spaghetti sauce in the meantime. Okay, so the potatoes are heating up, and I wanted to mention really quick, so your pressure canner will come with a guide, and this will be your absolute best friend. It has basically anything and everything you could think to ask in it, all of your cooking times, your elevations, different things like that. So if you are needing to reference something, I would highly suggest checking into this as well. Don't throw this away. Keep this with you, because it will be your best friend. So like I said, we're going to wait for that to come up to temperature, start blowing steam before we put the weights on, and I'll walk you guys through that. And I believe, so like, for instance, I couldn't remember, usually I do them in pints, the potatoes, and I was like, the cooking time's 35 minutes, and I believe the quarts would just be 40 minutes. So I'm going to find it in here. So there's a section that says potatoes, and it goes over each individual low acid food. So you're just going to want to find potatoes. I have white potatoes. And it will tell you if you're doing a hot pack or a raw pack. So I did raw pack, and I need to do quarts for 40 minutes. So just for example, it'll give you different things to look for: hot pack, raw pack method, and your cooking time. So like I said, this comes in handy. And even just me, I always reference it, even though I've done it a million times. But like I just did that in quarts. Usually I do them in pints. So it's good to have to check on the times. That way I don't have to get on my phone and look it up. Okay, so the next recipe we're going to be working on together is the oven roasted marinara recipe on page 204 in the new ball book of canning. So like I said, I've never made roasted marinara sauce before. I made roasted salsa the other day, and it was absolutely delicious. So I'm really looking forward to this. I will say out exactly what we need as I go, and I will put a full recipe down in the description so that you don't have to like write things down as I'm saying them. You can just look and it'll all be there for you. It does call to use plum tomatoes. I don't personally have any plum aroma tomatoes to use for this, otherwise I would. But the tomatoes that I have sitting on my counter, absolutely, like, they have to be used up. And these are going to be way juicier than plum aroma tomatoes. But that's okay. I'm going to just chop off the bad parts, roast them, and if I have to cook them down longer to get them thicker, that's totally fine. So you use whatever kind of tomato you have and make it work for you. So I'm going to start going through these, getting them chopped up. And then I have a baking sheet right here. We're going to get them all laid out, and we're going to turn the oven on broil and start letting these roast. Okay, so like I said, these tomatoes are not Romas, and so you can see the seeds. I'm just going to squeeze all of these out, or as much as I can anyway. I guess if a couple seeds get in the batch, it's not the end of the world. So I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze all of these seeds out into the trash can. And then the first one, I squeezed all of the ones out that I could, and I'm just going to lay them down on the baking sheet. And as you're going, just make sure you're cutting off any of the bad spots. But I have all different kinds and colors to use, so I think it's going to give a really good mix to the sauce. And this yellow tomato is massive. My yellow tomatoes did really, really good for me this year, which yellow tomatoes typically don't have like a whole lot of flavor, but they sure are pretty, and they do add like a really nice color to anything that you make with them. So I got one tray completely done. I know I have enough tomatoes to do another tray, and then it says to do 1.5 cups of onions to go with this. So I'm just gonna do the onions on the next tray with the tomatoes, and that'll give me 2 trays between all of the tomatoes on this one, and then I'm gonna mix the onions and the tomatoes on the next one. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the other one. My pressure canner is still heating up, so whenever that is ready for the next step, I will bring you guys back and we'll get started there. Oh, I forgot to mention also, the recipe says to bake the tomatoes at 375. I originally said I was just going to broil them, but I did go ahead and turn the oven on to 375. I will go ahead and let them cook in there for about 30-ish minutes, and if it's not like charred the way that I personally would like it, then I'll just do the broiling for the last little bit of the process. But all in all, we're going to bake them / broil them for about 40 minutes. Okay, second tray done, going in the oven. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this. It might be a little bit difficult to see on camera, but this is shooting steam now, and it's very steady. You kind of want to avoid where it's like just kind of spitting here and there. You want a steady stream of steam, which is what mine is doing. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and start a timer for 10 minutes. Once the timer goes off, I will go ahead and stick my jiggler weight on it. Now, with my pressure canner, it comes with this little jiggler weight. So if you take the top one off of this, which is what it goes in increments of 5. So if you took both of the weights off of this, it would be 5 pounds. One of the circular weights would be 10 pounds. And if you stuck both of them on, it would be 15 pounds. So for potatoes, we are going to can them at 10 pounds of pressure, which is this just one circle on it. So I'm going to go ahead and let this steam for 10 minutes, and then after the timer goes off, we will get the weight stuck on here. Okay, so the timer went off for 10 minutes. I went ahead and stuck the weight on top, which is 10 pounds of pressure. So this is still at a high. Go ahead and keep your stove at a high. We're going to leave this on the highest temperature your stove can go until this jiggler starts to move. Now, whenever it becomes consistent, then we will start our processing time for 40 minutes. And on my pressure canner, there's this little notch here that tells me that pressure is in the canner. So this lets me know that this is up to pressure. If this pops up before you put your weight on, that's totally fine. Usually mine does whenever I'm allowing it to come up to the 10-minute mark for the steam. So if your little thing pops up before you go to put the weight on, that's totally fine. So that's up. That's allowing me to know that there's pressure in this. My weight is on. My stove is still at a high. So now the next step that I'm looking for is this little weight to start to jiggle. So the tomatoes are still in the oven. They're baking away. I'm going to wait for this to start moving, and then I will meet you back whenever the next step is happening. Okay, so the jiggler is moving. This is still at a high. So after you notice that this is moving continuously, you're going to want to turn your oven down to like a continuous pressure to where this isn't just jiggling back and forth nonstop. Now, if this thing is jiggling constantly, your pressure is way too high and your heat is way too high. So you'll have to kind of find the sweet spot on your oven. For mine, personally, it's about a 6. And the jiggler itself only needs to move like a couple times a minute. You definitely don't want to keep it too low, but you don't want to have it too high where it's rattling nonstop. So I would say a good temperature would just be whatever medium is on your stove. So go ahead and find that. Get your oven to that, and now that this is moving, we can start our timer. So I have the timer going for my tomatoes on here, but I'm going to place a 40-minute timer on our phone. That's for my altitude. You're going to need to determine what your altitude is for your processing time. But for me, for quarts of potatoes, it's 40 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get a timer going on that. And after this is done processing, I will meet you back. Okay, so the timer just went off for the pressure canner, so I went ahead and shut off the stove. Now, it's going to take a little while for this to come down to pressure, so shut your stove off after you're done. The jiggler will completely stop moving. This has to cool completely, and this little notch right here has to completely come down. It cannot still be standing up before you can even open the lid of your pressure canner. So shut it off, give it plenty of time to cool down. Don't try and take the weight off of it to let the air come out. Don't move it off of your stove. Don't do anything with it. Just let it sit here.
cool down on its own and let the pressure gauge completely come down before you even try to open the canner. So after this has cooled down substantially and come down to pressure, I will open it and take the potatoes out, and then we can get started on the marinara sauce.
Potatoes are done coming down from temperature. The little gauge right here that lets us know that pressure is in here is dropped. So now that this is dropped and this is cooled down, I'm going to go ahead and take the weight off and just set it to the side. Now, when you go to open your canner, do not open this and flip it towards you, because this has a ton of steam in it. It's very hot. You do not want to burn yourself. So what you're going to do is you're going to twist this open, and always, always, always point this lid away from your face. Do not open it towards you. So I'm going to go ahead and get the lid off of this and just set it to the side to cool down. And when you open this, the jars are going to be hissing. It's still going to be very hot. So I usually like to just let it sit with the lid off of it for, I don't know, 2 to 3 minutes, and just let it cool down, because it's extremely hot. So go ahead and let this just cool down for a second, and then we will get the jars out of the canner. So while those are just cooling down for a moment, I'm going to start plucking off the skins of these tomatoes, because now all of this is cooled enough for us to work with. So, and like I said, these skins come off they just slip right off. So, ta-da. Definitely super easy to get them off. Way less work if you just let it cool down for a bit. Then all of these will just come right off. Now, you can like dehydrate your tomato skins and make like a tomato powder. You could do like tomato like seasoning powder with it and add various different things to it. I'm not going to go through all of that. But if you would like to come up with another way to use these, obviously feel free to keep your skins and use them for something different. I just don't need any like tomato-based powders or anything like that at the moment. But you definitely can repurpose the tomato skins if you would like to. Okay, so got all the skins off. I'm just going to go ahead and I grabbed my stock pot. Now, it's not going to fill up a huge stock pot, so I just grabbed a smaller one. But I'm going to start getting all of this in this pot and get these trays out of my way so I can start unloading the canner of potatoes. And try to leave the juice on the tray as much as you can. Just grab like the tomatoes themselves. They did let out a lot of juice in the roasting process, so definitely don't scoop up all the extra juice, because then you're just going to have to cook it down longer. And the original recipe calls for 20 pounds of tomatoes. Now, I don't have 20 pounds. I know I at least probably have 10. So I'm just going to make adjustments for half of the batch. But whatever you have, if you have the exact amount or double the amount or half the amount, you just adjust it for what you need and the ingredients that you have. Okay, so I got the tomatoes and stuff on the stove. I'm going to go ahead and get the potatoes out. And then I'm going to move that pot over to my bigger burner, and we will start on the marinara sauce. So go ahead and lay a towel down on your counter, because those jars are going to be incredibly hot and your counter is very cold. You don't want them to bust coming out of it. Go ahead and lay this down. Grab an extra washcloth or towel or whatever to put on the bottom of your hand so that you don't actually accidentally burn yourself. Okay, so those are out. They look awesome. And so I'm not going to touch these for a full 24 hours. They're just going to sit here, cool down, seal, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then I will label them and get them stored up tomorrow. So after these are all done, like cooling down and everything, and I've waited the 24 hours, I do store my jars without the rings on them. If you watched my pantry organization video, I did end up finding a jar down there that was completely unsealed, and that's why I don't store the rings on my jars, because if they're gonna fail, I want to know it. So I will take the rings off tomorrow as well, and then they will be put up on the shelf with just the seals on top, no rings on them. So that's how I do it. That's how I would recommend you do it. Some people store them with the lids on. I personally don't. So Anywho, these are done and that's awesome. So one thing off of our list, and let's move on to the marinara sauce. Okay, so here's what this is looking like, and the next step I'm going to do, so I went ahead and flipped the heat up to about a medium. I'm going to go ahead and get this blended up, and then we will add the rest of the ingredients. All right, so after you have your sauce blended up, it calls for 1 cup of wine, red or white, dried. I'm gonna go ahead and add that. And citric acid or lemon juice. I usually prefer to use citric acid, but I just have some lemon juice left over here that I really need to get used up and it's almost gone, so I'll put that in there. Garlic. Quite a bit of garlic. Basil. Then some pepper. Lots of pepper. Regular salt. Some homegrown oregano. So I went ahead and tasted this. I did adjust the garlic just a little bit, but it is really, really good. Like, I am pleasantly surprised by how delicious this is. I was a little bit hesitant with adding the wine. I know that's like pretty typical in like red sauce based things, but I was like, I don't know about that, but this is phenomenal. So it's pretty thick already, but I'm going to go ahead and just let it thicken up and cook a little bit, really marry those flavors together, and then we will go ahead and get this dried up together. Okay guys, so after the marinara sauce was able to thicken up on the stove for a little bit, I just went ahead and filled the jars up. You want to leave a 1/2 inch of a headspace, and so I thought I was going to have time to process these. Unfortunately, I am not going to. I need to be getting ready for my husband's birthday dinner, but that's totally okay. I'm just going to let them cool down on my counter, and then I'm going to stick them in the fridge and process them tomorrow. And then one of the jars was short on the amount that I needed. That's also fine. I'll just use it sometime this week and make some red sauce based recipe with it. Now, I will say this recipe is phenomenal. I am going to do a big batch of this sometime in the future, in a future canning video, because I really, really like the taste of it with the wine and everything else. So if this is a recipe that you were thinking about giving a try, I would highly recommend it. So yeah, that wraps up my canning day. Got the potatoes done. These will be processed at a later date. And I don't know, I feel like we accomplished quite a bit on this day, which is always super nice. I love doing canning videos with you guys. I love canning, gardening, doing all of those things, and I'm just really thankful that I get to share all of those things with you guys. So if you have any suggestions on things that you guys would like to see in future videos, or you would like to see how I use these, I would greatly appreciate you subscribing. I'm gonna try and do a lot of videos that are based on like recipes, gardening, canning. We'll have like the new house befores and afters, building my new garden. Like, there's just so many things that are getting ready to go on that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you guys. So if you have any suggestions, if you have anything that you would like me to know, please always feel free to comment down below. And I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching, you guys. I will see you next time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.